Hi, I'm Noam Wasserman, Dean of the SciSim School of Business at Yeshiva University. I was a longtime professor at Harvard Business School, an entrepreneur, and a venture capitalist. I wrote the bestseller, The Founder's Dilemmas.
And I'm Charlie Harary. I've been working with companies for over 10 years. And that book, The Founder's Dilemmas, and the challenges faced by the 10,000 founders in it is the basis of this podcast. We are delving into the issues faced by startups to help you avoid the pitfalls that claim so many good companies.
Let's get started.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's an honor to be back with you. I'm here with Dean Noam Wasserman, the Founder's Dilemmas podcast. If you missed the last episode, you got to check it out. We spoke about rewards, equity. The touchiest part of a company is the equity. So check out last podcast. We're now delving into the next topic. So, Dean, what do you have in your mind for next as we build these concepts for founders and startups?
So one of the things that we want to tackle today is perhaps one of the most fervently held beliefs in Silicon Valley, that what separates the successful from the unsuccessful is persistence. Entrepreneurial persistence as being a key part of the magic, a key part of the things that founders have to double down on and be able to make a key part of their identity, the actions that they take, and the decisions that they make. And when I go and ask my students that, when I do a bunch of surveys and things like that, asking people, how much do you agree that persistence is the critical thing that founders have to have? Almost resounding agreement with it.
And not only there, but I think everywhere in life. I mean, everywhere you look, someone is telling you, just stick with it, right? And it's persistence that is the number one character trait. And you're saying that's not the case.
So we will see that there is the promise of persistence, but there's also the peril of persistence, and how we have to tune into the perils if we're going to be able to make a lot better decisions rather than being blinded by this just blind entrepreneurial persistence is what you have to be able to pursue.
I'm going to guess that you're not going to say that, going back to your couch and being lazy is going to be the answer. I'm going to guess that there's going to be another way to look at this.
No, absolutely. There's definitely things to balance in terms of should I be persisting with something that I'm ignoring the fact that it's going to fail? Because I could move on and be able to have a different impact on the world by starting something else. Mm-hmm. Very different than just becoming the couch potato and not contributing to the world. Definitely not the thing that we want to be able to spark and be able to encourage people to do. But being able to find the best ways to impact the world without being blinded by this persistence is a key piece of what we have to be able to have people think a little more deeply about. Started off, let me start with a couple of case studies, a tale of two founders.
Go for it.
First one is a founder named Vivek, who founded a company that was going to revolutionize the electronic ticketing industry. And he was taking on, it was a major thing that he was going to do, very aggressive, very aspirational, big industry in need of really a whole bunch of changing of how they do things, grand ambitions that he had. And he had actually assured his wife in order to get her to buy into his being able to do this founding. We talked early on in one of our past episode about making sure the personal side is there for you, that you're going to have the spousal support and everything that you need, the critical part. One of the ways that he was able to buy it was to assure her that in a year, if we are not succeeding at this, if I don't have the money coming in from a top investor, if we don't have a great customer that's going to be doing this for me, then I'm going to fold the venture. And so she gave him a thumbs up, and he went ahead and started building the venture. Grand ambitions to get investments from a top 5 VC, to get a deal with a top arena that is going to enable him to do it. Also, part of his being able to attract co-founders was the promise of the venture. He brought on a couple of rock star co-founders who had other options, and the promise of this going and revolutionizing the industry was a key part of doing it. Unfortunately, the year did not go the way he was expecting. Back to only looking at the rosy view of the world, back to only having the plans in place with a single scenario, that being the rocket ship scenario. And after a year, came down to it's still unclear about whether this is going to succeed. And in class, I would ask my students, so how many of you are going to fold the venture? And almost nobody.
You never fold the venture. Because you heard a million stories of that Zuckerberg and this is the folklore of they were about to lose it and then they made it work. You know what I'm saying?
And pushing through the dark days is what separates the best from the rest. And so all sorts of ways in which this was working against him. Lo and behold, show the students where things went. He shut it down.
Wow.
And so there's a lesson that we can get into when we get into an episode around serial entrepreneurship. He talked about she is going to be the constant. I'm going to be doing more than one venture. I need her support through each one of these. When I give her an assurance about something I'm going to do, I have to stick to it.
Wait, time out. He shut it down because of the promise he made to his wife, not necessarily over the future capacity of the company.
He had painted the scenario of future capacity of the company is going to be the rocket ship. When rocket didn't happen,
because of the integrity of his promise, he did it. He stuck to it.
And his having a longer term perspective on being able to realize that I need her to believe me, and when I make a commitment, I have to come through on it.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of a different lesson that also might come
from it. This is a lesson, sounds like the integrity of speech, and that when you say something, you better make sure that you have the integrity to close on it.
Exactly. So several things that are operating there, but this is one end of the persistence spectrum. A lot of times in class, students are saying, totally did not persist enough. That he should have kept going. He had aggressive plans around it. Lo and behold, there were several startups that came after that that sold for major money doing what he had wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
And all sorts of ways in which there was a bit of that regret that sparked when one of them sold for $300 million. And a friend emailed him, "This could have been you." Wow. It was like the dagger in his back around it, but he said, I had to stick to what I was telling my wife to do it. But the students very much come out that this is the under-persistent story.
So how do you know, there's two pieces to this story, right? I'm seeing it in two different ways. There's the know what your constants are part of this, which is a fascinating piece that people I don't think understand, right? Which is, if my constant is my wife and I'm delivering for my wife, then I got to deliver for my wife, and the company really is ancillary to her. And to use more business terms, if it's the lender, right, or if it's an investor, or if it's a client, right, whoever your constants are that you're making assurances to, being able to have integrity of speech. Then there's the knowing when the company needs to get shut down. So the first one feels to me like a value, right? And knowing who your constants are and knowing how to have integrity in what you're saying and knowing. Now, listen, I don't know what'll happen I don't know what's going on in his pocket, but I'm sure that in his marriage, his wife believes him, which, by the way, over the course of his life may have really impacted his pocket, right? So, but how does one know when to shut down the venture for the venture's sake? When to say, this is a bad idea, or we're going to run out of money, or this is just, we don't know how to do this. Like, I know people that get involved in companies because they're entrepreneurs, and then they think that they can just figure it out. And they can't. They don't have enough experience. They're not as well-resourced as those that can. And they heard a million times how Google wasn't well-resourced, and, Alta Vista, or I don't remember the other names of the companies, but right? And they want to be that. But they're really not able to play with the big boys. And at some point, somebody says, guys, enough is enough. How does one make that call?
So let me get into that by painting the second founder for you.
We didn't plan this, by the way. This is just.
So the other one was a founder named Tim, and he founded something that in its early days was called Savage Beast. This is an online music company that was trying to bring attention to artists that hadn't been discovered yet. Be able to learn the preferences of the listeners. They could click on like this one, don't like this song, and then being able to see what is the profile, what he called the music genome, of what they are, what are the profiles of the types of music that they like. And now we go and see among the undiscovered artists where we might be able to find a match for their tastes.
Great.
And he had been a musician. He had been the starving musician himself that had seen this pain in the market. And that's where he'd come up with this idea and decided, let me be able to have this solution that I'm going to bring to it. And lo and behold, he ended up trying to raise money from 300 venture capitalists.
God bless him. I love him.
And getting a no after no after 298
He's Walt Disney. He's Walt Disney, right? You know those stories? He's the KFC guy. Those are the stories.
One of the key problems is that we hear those stories and we don't appreciate the Tims of the world and the pain that you go through.
Sure.
He talks about the sequential disappointment. Sure. I'm putting my baby on the line. I am putting myself out there, bearing all to these investors about everything that I am dreaming of, and they keep telling me no.
Nope.
They are giving me the ultimate sequential rejections
right.
that I am going to be facing with that. He ends up getting a failure to get deals with Best Buy, with a bunch of the other companies that are possible. No after no that he was getting through it. Ended up having hired a bunch of people, couldn't pay them because he wasn't raising the money from that. Ended up getting sued by his employees for back wages.
Wow.
Think about each of these things crashing in on the founder, and yet Tim persisted through it. This is, you're going through the pain, going through the Gehenna that is, all of the founders, the roller coaster ride. There has been no up on the roller coaster as you are trying to persist through this. Is there a happy ending
here, or is the lesson here know when to fold?
So let's pour even more on this fire.
Oh, poor guy, poor Tim.
A decade in, after his continually hoping and dreaming that just around the corner that it will happen, there's a congressional proposal to hike the internet royalties that you have to pay for the music that you use. Going to completely kill any little business model that he has had. It's essentially going to shut down his company. This is a very talented guy. He had gone to Stanford. He had done all sorts of things in the world. A decade in, not even knowing whether your baby is going to be able to continue living is what he was facing each step of the way.
Wow.
And he kept persisting through all of these dark days because of telling himself about all of those stories about
Walt Disney,
you have to ignore the market, the founder and the gut, the way in which I'm ignoring those signals. And so this is the over persistence possibly that you're going to have that complements Vivek's under persistence of throwing in the towel too much. And all sorts of ways in which the major pain, and also this is a very talented guy who could have been impacting the world. If he had folded after 5 years, he could have had another venture that he'd been building for 5 years to be able to change it. And this is a bit of the cost, the human cost, the major pain that he had in his personal life and elsewhere, all sorts of ways that we have and is not impacting the world because he's able to free himself up from the handcuffs of this venture. And so this is the other side of the persistence and some of the costs that it introduces.
So maybe I could split this hair. Tell me what you think of this. It seems to me that the way in which a person is able to properly navigate the roller coaster of company building is if he is not in any way married to his company, right? The concept of marriage is forever. So the goal when one gets married is they stop trying to fix their spouse because they're not it's usually a failed venture, but the point is that you're marrying somebody forever. So when somebody founds a venture, or many times they inherit a venture, right, a company, sometimes they look at it like they're married to it. And when you're married to something forever, you start to put blinders onto the truth. And so mistakes do not become great teachers. They become painful distractions that some people do not agree with you. It becomes almost dogmatic. Whereas the Ray Dalios of the world will say, I built Bridgewater, one of the greatest hedge funds maybe ever, because I have conditioned my people to fight for truth over everything else. When you learn from pain, it'll tell you. It'll tell you at some point, it's been a pleasure, like wrong, or keep on going. But if you're married to your venture, you'll take the pain and you'll miss the signal. And as a result, either under persist or over persist to your peril.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of the things that you're teeing up there. First off is it's tough enough as a founder, as we've talked about in past episodes, to be able to have that clear view of the world, not have your passion cloud it, not have that emphasis on persistence cloud the things that you're thinking about. When the world is falling in, your thinking is going to be even more clouded.
Yep.
There's something in academia, it's called prospect theory, about the very different ways that people look at gain versus loss.
Sure.
And
Is
when
that
you
Kahneman's
are
research?
Yeah, exactly. Kahneman and Tversky, there's a bunch of the things that they did around the psychological side of it. And if you think about yourself and a founder at a gambling table, and you've lost something, you still have a few more chips that are on the table, what is going to be your reaction to that? You're in a loss scenario. You're going to double down.
Right.
And that's where you keep digging further. Sure. It's the classic line about if you're in a hole, keep digging if you want to get yourself into even more trouble. And so that's what that psychology is of having your thinking clouded. You're going to try to avoid an even bigger risk by doubling down on it, and then you are heightening even more so the disaster scenario for you.
Yeah, I tell you maybe one of the most important lessons that I have learned. When I was in Columbia for law school, I would sneak out and take. You can audit classes in the entire university. So I didn't have the time because I had to get to start working already. But I would audit business school classes. I would not sneak in, but I would sign up for as many business so that would fit into my schedule. And I forgot the name of this professor, but one of the professors at Columbia was an expert in management, and he gave a class, I'll never forget this, called Managerial Decision Making. So I got there, it was me and all MBA students, right? So he passes out a fact pattern, and we got to come up with scenarios, and he puts all the answers on the board, what you would do, and he sort of puts all the answers out and goes, how would you rate yourself as a decision maker? And I'm like, come on, I'm like a third-year law student. Like, come on, we know how to make decisions. So we all rate ourselves at probably over 70% at this scale.
You're like, woe begone.
And he wipes us out. And then he says, it was brilliant. He shows on the screen how all of our decisions in the first iteration was somewhere average. And then when the second fact pattern showed the problem in our first decision, we all doubled down.
Yep.
And we all made the worst decision, not on the first go-around, on the second go-around. And he said, when you look at the business world, most first decisions, they're not that bad. Maybe you didn't have all the information, whatever. Where the money gets lost, where the pain happens is when, exactly what you just said, it's the second decision. It's throwing good money after bad. It's the continuation, the doggedness. And I'll never forget that day. And there were people in this room that, were magnitudes of order more brilliant than I. That was it. He had us. And he just, from then on in, we were like, whatever you say, we're going to follow. And then, the class went from there. And he really taught us how to navigate a lot of these biases that we don't, like you said, we get from the folklore of the business world, or we get it from our own, biases that we have that really prevent good decision making.
Yeah, that's what we have to surface with founders and with students and things like that. What are the assumptions you don't even realize you are making?
Yeah.
Then once you surface them, now we can question them and be able to see how the biases in us are going to get in the way of our being able to do these things well. And so for Tim, every step along the way, he doubled down on the losses and dug himself into this major hole of being brought up in San Francisco court from the employees who were suing him and continuing to dig himself even further into these things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I ran into when I was teaching in China, great line that they have about decide on the rules of the game ahead of time, including the quitting time.
Great.
Do it when it's dispassionate. Do it when you haven't hit the losses yet and are doubling down. And so a little bit of a forethought about acknowledging to begin with that there's going to be a pitfall, that maybe we're going to have to quit the venture. And now what are going to be the signs that tell me that we're supposed to do it? Another ones that you went and teed up is the mistake as teacher. And that's also very tightly wedded to this. This is where we can see a bit of some of the things from Judaism, where we can see some of the thinking around that. There are failures that are productive and failures that are unproductive.
Yep.
And the unproductive failures are where you don't learn anything from it, where you keep digging yourself further into the hole, and there's no benefits that are coming from it. A lot of the things in Judaism, you can think about in some ways the two core characteristics, if we're boiling things down. I think that there's actually a tension that's a delicious one between them in Judaism. Resilience and yet humility. As being two of the things that I think that are fostered among them. And that resilience part and being able to have the humility of being able to bring the two together, I think, are what founders need to have together. And to me, a person who embodies it across the Talmud has to be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, all-time great. He's the one, story after story, that in disaster, that he is able to see the glimpse of the light. He's able to see where this failure is going to be able to turn into something strong for us. He had actually had, people usually talk about two teachers that he had that are more prominent, but for 22 years, he learned under someone named Nachum Ish Gamzu, who instilled in his students the Gamzu Latova mindset of when we hit a real failure, that we have to find ways that it's going to turn into something that's going to be good. and ideally, entrepreneurially, that we seize on the failures to be able to get stronger from it.
Yeah.
And classic story that we have, it comes from the 60th page of the first of the tractates in the Talmud. And the era that we are now hopefully exiting right now, the COVID era, I think it sets the tone for it. It happens to be that I trace the beginning of the COVID era to March 3rd, 2020. As it turns out, that day in what's called Daf Yomi, it's a 7-year cycle where people learn one page of the Talmud each day. The 60th page of that first tractate, Brachos, was the page where we learn from Rabbi Akiva about how we recover from failure.
Wow.
We have God through Rav Meir Shapiro, who started this program a century ago, essentially sending us a signal that we're about to hit the ultimate disaster scenario.
Right.
The world is going to be hit by an epidemic, and we have to find the ways to be able to get stronger from it.
Right.
Be able to have glimpses of where we're having to think differently, going through the detour over time as we're going to our office and finding a better way that we can be able to go and have that commute, the detour that turns into now the plan A rather than the plan B and things like that. And this is the same kind of thing that we have to bring as the entrepreneurial mindset.
For sure.
How do we learn in the best way from the failures? How do we get stronger from them? How does creativity sparked by crisis become something that we can be able to build into our fabric? It is not a natural thing to do.
No.
It's something we have to retrain. It took 22 years for Rabbi Akiva under Nachum Ish Gamzu, but this is the way in which we can be able to learn from the failures, not over persist through them, but be able to get stronger from them.
Right, for sure. And I think one of the most important parts to this process is in the words of Rabbi Nachman, who consistently reminds his followers that you are not sin, right? You've committed sin, but you are not sin. And I think that's a major issue that people grapple with, which is failure doesn't make you a failure. Really, where I think people get tripped up is when they see failure, they see it as a proof to how they feel about themselves and not the reality of the challenges of actually launching a company, right? So, in many ways, when you look at sports, which provides a great example to this, nobody gets out 5 times out of 10 and thinks they're a failure in baseball, right? Yet when it comes to life, your first strikeout and you're like, I'm terrible. And so you're constantly trying to justify wins or trying to somehow navigate wins, because what you really are trying to do is navigate yourself. And so part of this game, part of this evolution that you're speaking to, that we're trying to nail down together now, which is so critical for those that are listening, because it's going to help you not only in a company sense from a macro perspective, but from a decision sense, right? It's a micro approach towards your life, which is to be vigilant to whether or not the decision that you're making and you're doubling down to protect your own confidence, to protect your own ego. And not from an ego from a selfish perspective, from the fragility of one's ego in life. We all hate to fail. We all hate to be failures. We all hate to mess up. Part of the beautiful thing about Judaism is Judaism almost builds failure in. We're constantly saying sorry. We have holidays built on sorry. We have Jewish mothers that remind us that we should say sorry. The whole religion is based on. So it's almost okay because God has already sort of baked in plenty of I'm sorry moments. So we sort of go to them and go, all right, I can say sorry. But that doesn't work in business, and that doesn't work when you're using someone else's money. It doesn't work in life. But it needs to. And I think what you're saying is exactly right. But unless people are willing to have an uncomfortable thought process, right? Yes, last podcast you spoke about, and for those who haven't yet, go back and listen to the difficult conversations in the relationships and how critical they are, and front-loading those. And I think this is a great example of front-loading or just grappling with difficult thinking, which is I can fail and not be a failure. And if I don't get that straight, then I'm not going to trust myself to make decisions post-failure. And I think that's where people that's part of the evolution of a founder. And by the way, I've seen this, and I know you as well. The companies that I've seen that stand the test of time and are resilient usually have people at the top that are cool with failure. Like, they're cool with it. Like, you go to them, and you're like, whoa, 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 and they're like, it's okay. Like, what are we doing about it? Right? And the companies that really constantly struggle are companies where the people at the top demand perfection. And I think that's a tremendous distinction, and we should make sure we get it in our own minds.
Yeah, absolutely. You're pointing to, actually, I would go in beyond what you were talking about there. There is the cool with failure, which is to me a middling way that you're going to be able to deal with it. Persist through the failure.
Yeah.
However, there's even better of we seize on the failure as an opportunity to get stronger.
Exactly.
That's the seizing on the Gamzula Tova.
Exactly.
And what you're talking about is don't take on the identity of I have failed. Take on the identity of I get stronger from failure.
Exactly.
I am someone who is good at doing that by going and taking, if anything, small failures, the little bumps in the road. You hit a red light when you're in a rush. And you find a way, how can this become a Gamzula Tova? How can I have gotten stronger from being able to take this small thing and then make it into an exercise that when a big thing hits me, I've already practiced in the small about how to be able to take on that very different mindset. And that enables us to gain an identity of I'm going to make this into a productive failure because I'm good at doing this. Over time, if you can build those muscles, you're going to be very different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's wrap up here. I think this is an important moment right now for us to sort of grapple with this, right? And so let me take a shot and you tell me where I'm wrong, right? We spoke a lot in this episode about persistence, knowing just how to manage that properly. Under persistence, you've got to understand when you got to keep on rolling and knowing where integrity of speech is helpful and hurtful to your business. And then there's really what we're really driving to is really over persistence. And the story of Tim and in his sort of doggedness is really what caused his failure. And that sort of stems from a lot of different deep scenarios, right? We spoke about connecting the psychology of being a failure to failing. We spoke about not seeing the signs, not persisting through it in a way in which you see it as a teacher, and learning from each failure and growing from each failure and being able to adapt and pivot for the failure. And how important it is that you're not married to your venture, but you're married to truth. And allowing the failures and the pain that is normal for you doing something hard to really help you navigate finding truth, which can sometimes be let's keep on rolling and sometimes be let's shut down. But in no way is the answer, well, Walt Disney did it 100 times, and so I'm sure my success is around the corner. It requires a real ability to be good with truth, really over success.
Absolutely. Great encapsulation. Let me just put an exclamation point on it. There was a recent tweet that Rav Aryeh Leibowitz, who's the head of the rabbinics program at Yeshiva University, that he had. He was talking about Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal, who was possibly the most important Jewish social entrepreneur of the last few decades. He founded Eish HaTorah, which has completely revolutionized a bunch of it. It turns out that Rav Weinberg Zatzal, he was a failure after failure in the early days as he kept trying to do this. And what the tweet was Rav Weinberg reflecting on that my failures were a precondition for my success because I was able to harness it to get stronger, be able to learn new things, and be able to set up myself for being able to succeed. If he had thrown in the towel, if he had under-persisted, the world would be poorer for it.
Absolutely.
Being able to read these signals well, being able to think more deeply about how do I set myself up to learn from it is how we get stronger over time and be able to leverage a bunch of things that other people would have said, failure, I'm out of this, I'm going to throw in the towel and not impact the world the same way that he was able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are listening and you want to send us a question, a thought, an idea, foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com, foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love your feedback, your thoughts, and your questions. Thanks so much for listening, and we can't wait to speak to you next time.